which has to do with the missing element in all shopping technologies now is human preference. People buy products. You guys are all humans. You know what it's like. You know when you like something, you know when you don't. And so we buy products that we can see, we emotionally connect with us. We don't even have to think about it because our emotions are connecting to our individual sensory preferences. And these are for products that we buy, like a car, clothes, homes, things that we fit, look, and feel when we're in the environment of whatever the object is, whether a car or a home. So I'm an accidental practitioner of human preference. I've been in apparel for years. I was design director to Nordstrom, running $200 million brands. And in that capacity, I was taking private label programs into private brands. I was globally sourcing, running the design teams of product. And I realized that, wow, products made in different places with different fibers and different textiles and came up differently. The same garment made in Japan could be totally different than the same garment made in Italy. And at the same time, I would go on the retail floor all the time, because part of my job I got a bonus on, was to have people buy the product, sell through. So I'd sit and watch women particularly try on things that they couldn't button the jacket, but they loved it and they bought it anyway. So it's like I go, oh my gosh, I connected the dots. So that was my first apparel company or tech company in 1999. And through that time, I've been working to build with my team an agnostic digital platform that can now, which we couldn't even do a decade ago, leverage artificial intelligence to run through all the calculations needed to decode individual human preference. So AI, like I said, has changed everything. And what AI does is gives us, the human, the ability to self-identify or self-curate to the machine. And this is really important difference, because computer science and lots of the different technologies we're using now to try to get people to products they love, they are based on different algorithms that actually map people into segments, versus what really is what it is about is that a person can self-identify their preferences, and at the same time, databases filled with millions of SKUs can actually be sensory profiled, allowing a human and a product to use a machine to interact. So the most important thing I've learned over the last years is how to decode individual human preference. And like I said, the only way that this will work in technologies is if both the human and the product can self-identify their individual sensory preferences or attributes. This is the key. So for those of you out there who may think preference, I don't understand, I don't care about it, this is a 21st century opportunity. And if you're fascinated by the invisible, which goes on in the human mind, in quest of the known knowns, which isn't that the goal for all of us, then human preference shopping science is something you might want to take a look at. So let's get back to you. You know without knowing, and you know without thinking. You know all these things that you like without having to know or think. And that's the baseline. And that is cognitive, it's human, it's individual, and it is not binary. So, a fact. 95% of what we do is unconscious. Otherwise, it would take us hours to figure out how to drive to work, how to, cook dinner, how to buy that dress in a store. So it gives us, the humans, this extraordinary power to know immediately if we love a product. And the way we know immediately is that it's instantaneous, because the sensory attributes of that product resonate with our emotional preferences. And I say emotional because human preference, from the day you were born, this little baby here, from all the way up to now, you've been predisposed to prefer certain things. And as you move along through life, yes, you like new things, you experience new things, but at the baseline, there's always this core of human preference that gives you confidence and comfort. And imagine today what you're wearing. Think about the clothes you're wearing, with the jeans or the top or whatever. Are they comfortable? Do you feel good in them? Are they, easy to wear? Those are things. And we've all been in clothes that are awful to wear and we feel uncomfortable. So this is what we're talking about. So the number one reason you out there fall in love with a product is because it touches your individual sensory preferences. So the very best outcome for a human is finding something they love and want to buy. And in fact, science tells us, Stanford tells us, MRIs tell us that we get a dopamine high, which is like an emotional home run for us as a human. So here's the problem. Since 1995, back when Amazon started around there, and first they put on books and they put on apparel, and no one said clothes would sell online. Well, they're right, because things haven't changed since then. Because online conversion, and I'm sticking with clothes, but it works for other product categories, 3% online conversion, which means 97% that go to Amazon or Nordstrom or wherever don't buy. And of that, 40 to 50% return, because, well, now it's really easy to return because it's free. But people buy 2 or 3 things to get 1 thing. So it's a very ineffective system. So we're stuck. So the evidence requires a few definitions. One is, let's think outside of a bucket, which is segmentation and some of those other technologies. And let's think about, what does preference mean in preference shopping? It doesn't mean that I look at the weather at 9 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't mean that I ran around the web touching different things and clicking on garments. It doesn't mean any of those things. Individual human preference is individual to the person, and it is directly related to the sensory attributes of a product that elicit emotion from the intended customer, you. So old school inferred behavior, segmentation, collaborative filtering. If you like this, you like that because others did. Specifications, the worst, because you're just filtering through binary filters. The new way of looking at life in the new school is individual human preference. I mean, people don't want to be put in a bucket. And so that's the one thing, all paths lead back to buckets. And, I deep dive into what everyone's doing, all the newest technologies, and a lot of them are just riffs on the same thing with a different marketing angle. So here's the problem with the systems today. It's if or then. It's yes or no. It's true or false. These are all binary. Now, many systems say they have taken away some of these constraints and they do bigger, more deep decision learning trees. But none of it still works, because otherwise we would have solved this, and the business keeps growing, e-commerce. So it's the dichotomy of linear formulas. And what I say is that humans just say no to trade-offs, because if and then and yes and no and true and false are trade-offs. Agnostic systems. An agnostic system is human-centric in that a human is driving the results in the system. They're doing the inputs to get the outputs that enable them to get the product they want. So again, back to artificial intelligence, to be able to drive new intelligent systems that will enable self-identification. We are now at the forefront of a new digital era, human sensory preference-based shopping. Again, 95% of what we purchase is managed by our unconscious sensory preferences. So how about individually sensory preference matching a person to a product? That would disrupt shopping. So the bright future is the opportunity to humanize digital shopping. We have a convergence right now of computer science and AI-driven intelligent systems, and a flash to the past of expert systems. So these systems, and I'll talk more about that, enable us now to use voice in the small screen, so we're not so tethered to shop on bigger screens to be able to see what the heck is going on. So if Alexa or Siri know my individual sensory preferences, I can just say, Alexa, I need a pair of black pants. Try that now and see what happens. This is where the future is. So we use voice to, instead of ordering, Kleenex or, apples, I need a pair of black pants. So the solution we're talking about is, again, individually sensory preference matching people to products through the filter of human preference, not segmentation, not collaborative filtering, not any of the other riffs on solving this problem. So there are two industries that are huge, that are ripe for individuals, shoppers, sensory preference intelligence. And I'm going to just touch on those two today, but I could do a number of other industries. And the first one is the apparel industry. It's a huge business. I've already been talking about it. As the fact, okay, so when you buy apparel, it is a 3D sensory experience of taste, fit, look, and feel preferences, which are so subjective to you. And the way they interact with each other, only you know, but you don't know because you do it automatically. Fact that solutions that we have now do not work because they don't touch human preference. Here's one solution that doesn't work: specification-driven online shopping. It has nothing to do with you, it's not emotional, etc. Versus in-store shopping, which you are able to touch and feel. Well, these worlds now have come together as one, but you understand what I'm saying. Filters, binary filters don't work. In fact, you get hundreds of products that you have to sort through yourself. Here's words. Let's talk about words.
The kind of clothes that I like to wear are comfortable, yet stylish, up to date, yet still good for a mom on the go. Jeans, love jeans. Don't love prints, so I like solid stuff that I can dress up, I can dress down. Does that make any sense?
No, it doesn't make any sense. So speaking of sense, here, let's look at visually alike. These are 4 dresses that look the same, but they're by different brands. They have different fiber contents. They have, you can't see this, but there's different fits, there's different shapes. So visually alike is great, but it's not a way to preference match a human to an individual garment, because each dresser has a completely different sensory profile. So a fact, the interaction of the product's sensory attributes attract a buyer emotionally. So let's look at a jacket, the fabric, the fiber, the shape, the fit. So individual fit, look, and feel preferences are important in apparel, but they're also important in anything we get into, like a car or a home or a couch. So preference science is emotional mapping of a product's interactive sensory attributes to an individual's sensory preferences. Simple. And it changes everything about digital shopping, because instead of databases filled with millions of garments that are filtered through these other segmentation and specification, you're actually filtered through the sensory profiles of a garment to make a match to an individual human. So global online apparel is $822 billion right now. Been in the past 23 years, not one company has solved for individual human preference until now. Real estate. How about individually sensory preference matching a person to a home? Well, yes, there's many hundreds of homes and it's very unique, but using platforms like Zillow and Redfin, there's a lot of sorting people have to do when they could be matched through so many different aspects available with geolocation and all the RMLS printouts. They could be sensory matched to a house, at least get the ball rolling. So today again, like in apparel, they're using specification and keyword home search. Totally misses out on human emotion and sensory preferences. So again, the combination of a home's sensory attributes attract buyers emotionally. And US home sales are $1 trillion. So it's been 16 years since the first real estate tech company came out, and still none has solved for individual human preference. So back to what is old is new again, expert AI-enabled intelligent systems. This is key, because these are systems that have expert input, using sometimes or most times knowledge engineers working with that expert to make sure that the processing of the algorithms developed really relate to the end result of what it's supposed to be. It's not based on, it's a customized view of that particular industry. So these systems are flexible, they don't have rules, they're back to the self-identification and the use of knowledge. So I want to kind of reiterate this, because this is the thing that I think has stopped everything from going forward, is the dichotomy of using linear formulas to solve for cognitive solutions. And that's using data, the real kicker here, devoid of sensory inputs. So we built our technology. It took years to build this, lots of testing and stuff. And as I went and testing and built the formulas, you know, the goal was to, on one side, to elicit human preference, and the other side was to match those human preferences to a product. And so in my research, because I am not a computer scientist, like I said, I'm a practitioner, but the things that I have found in my scope of work and looking at things is soft computing, where it actually goes more into how the brain thinks, how the mind thinks. You know, the binary, you know, doesn't work. So fuzzy logic goes into to that space. Granularity, because each of the elements, each of the attributes of a product actually goes into a granularity of different elements that can be used. And then multi-agent systems. Each of the elements are individual to each other. They're not directed by one. And that's how you end up with an interactive, agnostic system, able to elicit human preference and match it to a sensory profile product. So fuzzy logic, uncertainty. A binary linear protocol, which I'm saying does not work. So what we need and what I've developed, I've been working on, is a method of processing that sensory data into human preference. And it deep dives into that invisible human preferencing space. And there are ways to understand that by an individual. So this is the new interactions, that the machine is listening to what the consumer has to say, and the processing is identifying what the sensory profile is of the product. It's agnostic. So this is the thing. This is why I think it's failed, and I won't go on through that again. So the other thing with preference is that there's a translating language, and so in terms of developing a system, it needs to have a proprietary logic that identifies the type of product you're working on, what industry. And then there's the reasoning engine so when the reasoning engine takes and has its formulas that pertain to the products that you're talking about, whether it's cars or homes, and it's able to take that data in and process it. So I call this a sensory attribute language. It translates human preference. It's agnostic, dynamic, and interactive. So where does human preference fit in AI? Right there in the deduction, reasoning, problem solving, and human-computer interaction. This is human preference. This is what we're talking about. And it's needed because most of these things are segmented under artificial intelligence into different buckets. Human preference covers all types of products in terms of what people buy. I call this a single user agnostic computing. This is like an old thing, diagram of an expert system. But expert systems leveraged by the power of artificial intelligence allow a single user to self-identify, and I call that agnostic computing. So preference intelligence is the new human data. There's a number of business cases. Number one is product recommendations, digital ads, those crazy retargeted ads, email. The other thing is supply chain. I mean, rich data of the known knowns, the sweet spot of computing and retailing. Those are factors that don't exist now in my years in retail. So the future of e-commerce, human preference intelligence driven by AI. So before this is over, and I think I made good time here, the questions to think about or to ask or consider is, you know, what is individual human preference? I've gone over this very quickly, but what is it? And why is human preference as big as it is, and what I've explained, the opportunity, and it's not really on anyone's radar yet? Well, I can tell you the answer to that is because people don't get it. And why is the science of human preference important to human-computer interactions? For all the reasons I've stated. I mean, you can't have a computer interact with a human unless you have a bridge to interact. And the bottom line is, why is it not, human preference is not considered by both retailers and tech folk at this point? So I'm working to change that, and that's why I volunteered to do this webinar today. What's really cool is the vision of, and this isn't in a creepy way, but the way that preference intelligence can have a network effect that will streamline all sorts of digital shopping. And in fact, when we do profiling of people, it's just an alphanumeric number. It's nothing to do with who they actually are. So that's what is the future. That's what I see as the future. So the magic of sensory preference intelligence. Here we have a happy family, and through sensory preference engagement at retail, there's emotional continuous engagement, individual product recommendations across all forms of digital shopping and marketing. And so Prefeye is my company. We've done human preference intelligence for artificial intelligence, as I've outlined to you today. My goal is humanizing the digital shopping experience, sensory preference matching people to products they love, and I'm most excited about mobile and voice, because that's the future. No one's tethered to bigger screens to make that happen. They can just talk about it. Siri, I need a new pair of black pants.